Today we're going to cover invoice against contract. We're going to break this into 5 separate videos to downsize it into more palatable sizes. The first will be an overview. The second will be the options and flexibility of invoice against contract. The third will be the auto invoice and evaluated receipt settlement. Then we'll roll into receiving options, and then the last video will be a demo of the setup and configuration. So within the contract terms, there are 4 levels of options that you can choose. The item level is the most common. This is where you have fixed item list or a rate card for services. You have your reoccurring charges, variable expenses, milestones, and releases where you're going to set up items to purchase against on that contract. The next is a supplier level. We don't use this much anymore. It was used as a legacy true blanket agreement, so to speak, and it kept track of accumulators, tiered price discounts, where if you spent $1 million, it would then discount, maybe apply a 2% discount or something like that, and it could keep up with release limits as well. That one's not used as much anymore, but is still an available option if needed. Catalog level, so this is where you can set release limits. So if you have a catalog that has, say, a minimum release of $75, you can set that release limit. You can also set tiered price discounts. So if you spend you can set it either per release or cumulative. So let's say that if you have an order, place an order for $1,500, you get an additional 2% discount. You can set that on a per release, or you can say once we spend $500,000, we get an additional discount. You can set up that tiered pricing either way. And as well here, it keeps track and accumulates all of that spend as well. Finally, probably the least used, I have seen some customers use it, is a commodity level discount. And this commodity level discount is basically applies to specific commodity codes. So if you have a vendor that provides you discounts or various discounts, they can publish a catalog with standard pricing in it, and then you can take your discounts based on the categories. Evaluated receipt settlement, ERS, sometimes referred to as early receipt settlement, and auto invoice option are one and the same. The difference is that one pays when you receive the goods, one pays on a scheduled due date. And so early receipt settlement or evaluated receipt settlement is available for item level contract terms and allows this to automatically generate an invoice based on the receipt. And so once you receive it, a INV document will be generated in the system. All of your same approval rules will apply to that if you have any set up, and it will go through the IR and then apply a payment at the end of that. Automatic invoicing is basically the same, only it is for those scheduled, fixed, and reoccurring items where you're going to automatically have a schedule that says we owe this amount every quarter. So every quarter we're just going to automatically generate an invoice. It will go through all of the standard invoicing approval rules, tax, workflow, etc. Unless it's specifically turned off, you do have the option of turning that approval workflow off, and then it will automatically pay the vendor after that. So let's talk a little bit about blanket purchase orders and contract terms and releases, because this is a very confusing topic, especially the way that SAP Ariba describes what a BPO is. In a traditional BPO model, a lot of customers refer to that as just a bucket of money, just $1 million that can be invoiced against. It doesn't really validate contract pricing versus invoice price. And some customers enter it as a PO with reverse price and quantity. So they'll do, $1 million at one each, or $1 million each at $1. And so they'll reverse that quantity and price. An Ariba blanket purchase order, however, is very different than that. That is a available option on these contract terms that will push these to the network as a purchase order. And so it creates a purchase order on the supplier's Ariba network account, and is really the difference is how the supplier can access and invoice that. On the non-BPO option, they actually have to go into their network account, choose you, and then select create contract-based invoice. that pulls them into your system and your site where they can then see those line items to create that invoice. So very different thing than a traditional BPO. Ariba invoice against contract non-release is where you're going to set up these line items, and again, the supplier is going to punch in, submit invoices, and this is basically materials, services, fixed and recurring fees, and cost and expense, where you can set that up. Then you have invoice against contract release. This is effectively where you're going to cut requisitions against your or against your contract through a catalog process. And so this is effectively, even though you're tying all of the spend together, it is going to put that spend together under the PO and receipt invoice process. And so it follows the standard through match of the PO, receipt, and invoice. It just ties all of that spend back to the contract, allows you to do that tiered pricing, accumulators, release limits, and things of that nature. And then finally, up in the top is Ariba Contract Compliance. Sometimes you'll refer to it as ACC, contract terms, or invoice against contract. All three basically mean the same thing. And that is your option for direct invoicing, BPOs, and releases. Again, Ariba BPO meaning that it's going to send it on the network, which is different than the traditional BPO. And it allows for probably the most flexibility in the system, as we've discussed previously, where you can set up a lot of different options to allow for invoicing, releases, non-release, etc. Thank you for the time today.